Have you ever wished you could sit down with one of the world's smartest people and ask him what their advice for living is? What is all the wisdom you've collected over all these years? Well, if so, you will love today's podcast with Kevin Kelly. Now, Kevin is a technologist. He's a entrepreneur. He's a creative. He's a philosopher. He's all of these things wrapped into one. And today he shares the most important advice he's learned across everything that he's done. And he also talks a lot about the advances in AI technology and how we can co-create with AI to build a better future. Please enjoy this conversation with Kevin Kelly. What Got You There is a podcast for high achievers looking to learn from the most successful people of all time what their strategies, lessons, and routines are that made them successful. Now it's your journey, so it's time to learn what's going to get you there. Kevin, welcome back to What Got You There. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
It's just so fun to dive into your life, your stories. And I've loved the recent book, what you just came out with, Excellent Advice for Living. And I'm always intrigued by the underlying drivers, the motivators behind why people take certain actions. And for you specifically, what led to you compiling all of this wisdom and writing this book?
Again, inadvertently, I didn't intend to write a book. I was really trying to put that into words, some of the things I've learned, turning 70. I never really preached very much to my kids. We didn't really have a lot of aphorisms. We tried to form and instruct them by what we did rather than what we said. But I found the challenge, I found that I wanted to finally put down some things in words, and maybe I was influenced by Twitter, but I really wanted to make them kind of little tweetable aphorisms, little proverbs. And I spent a lot of time trying to make them as small as possible, and that was sort of a challenge that I liked. Kind of suits my writing style of being a little telegraphic. And so after I did a bunch of them, I did this kind of this Hobbit version of a birthday present of giving them away my birthday to my children, and I put them on my blog. And there was such they kind of ricocheted around, they went viral, and that encouraged me to kind of do more of them and to realize that I had more to say when I was given the challenge of trying to make it into a tweet. And so I just kept going for several years. And then I realized that there was a book that you could hand to somebody. And that's sort of the origin of this idea of like, well, I have 450 of them. I can probably put them into a book.
You mentioned the challenge. Is seeking that challenge and trying to wrestle it a reoccurring theme throughout the other things that you've done?
Yes, I kind of realized kind of late in life that I'm a serial project person, and that I organize my life and think of my life in terms of not so much a career or an occupation, but as a series of projects. So I am very project oriented, and this little book, Excellent Advice for Living, was a project that kind of I didn't plan on doing that year. It would just sort of happen. But then once I saw it, oh, this is a project I could do. It would be good. No one else is going to do it. It'd be fun. It'd be beneficial. So then I treat it as a project, and projects can last years from when you first think of them until when you're kind of completely done with it. And so there's only a limited number of projects that I can do. And so I like to kind of think and carefully evaluate like whether this project is one I should do. And some of those criteria is, would I enjoy doing it? Would I be good at doing it? Would other people find it valuable? And lastly, and most importantly to me now, would anybody else do it? Because if someone else does it, I don't do it. So that part was really important.
Well, along with this, one of the things you say, the only productive way to answer what should I do now is to first tackle the question of who should I become?
Yes.
So I would love to know at this stage, who is Kevin Kelly working to become? What's that vision like in your head that you're working towards?
Yes, that's such a great question. So, so for me, I mean, part of what we're trying to do, all of us, and what I hope to encourage other people to do, is to become the best version of yourself, right? Become, and figuring out who we are and why we're here and what our mix of talents are and what it is that we can do that nobody else is very, very difficult. It is the most difficult thing in our lives. And it will take most of our lives to figure that out. There are some people who are blessed very early, maybe Mozart or somebody, who know very early what it is that they're really good at. But most of us, it takes some while to figure out what we're here for and what our purpose in life is. And your purpose has to be much bigger than your passions. Okay, I mean, we want to be working for something big. So all I'm saying is that yes, because I'm still alive, I'm still figuring that out. So I'm saying, it's like you don't really know until the end. And what I think I'm trying to become is a person who, I should say, what I think my mix of talents are in the arts and the sciences, is in technology and the arts. I've been a maker all my life. I've been making things since I was a kid, large scale things, from train layouts with lights and stuff when I was really kid, and then I made a nature museum when I was in middle school. Then I made a chemistry science laboratory when I was in high school. Went on to build a house from scratch, cutting down the trees and everything. So I've been a maker, but I've been involved in technology, but at the same time doing art all the time. And so and then sharing that. So for me, there's some combination of the person that I'm aiming to become is a word, is a function, occupation that we don't have a word for. It's a combination of kind of artist, technologist, philosopher, engineer. It's sort of it's a maker person who makes stuff and shares the stuff, and who maybe likes to talk about the stuff, who tries to understand it. So I don't think there's a word for that, but I think that's good. I think that we should. That's one of my bits of advice, is, if at all possible, try to work on something where nobody has a word for what it is that you do. Okay, and so part of where I'm aiming for is to have one where my occupation is kind of very hard to describe. That to me would be a success.
At what point did you get to this level of clarity that you're at now? I'm just thinking, if you were to zoom out, and it
Right.
seems like you're more in flow with your own
Right.
natural river right now. And I'm wondering, at what stage for you did that start to happen?
Very early. Even in high school, I was my hero was Henry David Thoreau.
Why was
Walden.
that?
Walden just was like, okay, do your thing, march to your own drummer. This is the 60s. Simplify your life, know thyself. I mean, it was like there was so much, and it was immediately, that's sort of what I want to become. I want to go in that direction of kind of inventing. And then the whole Earth catalog came along, which was giving you permission to kind of do your thing. And it's like, yes, that is me. I don't need to go to college, even though that was like unheard of in my high school. And it was very early on, I kind of knew that I wasn't going to have words for what it was that I did. I mean, I was going to be doing non-career like things. And the fact that I even wound up having a business card with a title was complete shock to me, because I was not at all aimed in that direction. All right. I mean, I was 35 and I was still working for $10 an hour at a nonprofit, and that was perfectly fine with me. And yeah. So the clarity about kind of like going on my own path was very early, and it seemed completely natural in a certain sense. Or I mean, it didn't seem like heroic. I mean, I wasn't being the hero. It wasn't like this was like an easy thing to do, just to kind of go along this thing, be nice to people, be helpful, but I'm on my own path.
One of the things that seemed to come out going through so much of this wisdom that you collected is kind of that meta concept of really being a great ancestor.
Yeah.
It seems like you're trying to pass things on, and I would love to just hear you describe, what do you think about when you think about embodying being a great ancestor?
Yeah. There's many different ways to kind of talk about that, and there's lots of good reasons to try and do that. I mean, basically, you want to leave the place in a better state than before. But I think one of the things I hated kind of history in high school. I was like, oh my gosh, this is just, I have no interest in the past. I'm really headed toward the future. But then when I was traveling in Asia for many, many years, that changed my mind, and I really began to read history, and I began to see the value of knowing the past. And one of the things that I learned about the past was the amount of subsidy, or the amount of support that the past has made for me. I look around all those streets, that most streets don't move. They're just improved over time. They're very old, particularly in older places like Europe and Asia. They've been the same streets for thousands of years, and people have been dedicating and working on and making it. So there's this infrastructure, there's this civilization that I inherit that enables me to get further along. And so the kind of debt, I'm much more aware of the debt I have to the people in the past who were good ancestors, meaning that they made something that they left behind for me to use. And that ranges from stuff that they've written to, the plumbing, to the other kind of knowledge that we accumulate and move forward in our libraries and our education process. So I owe the past so much, and I became much more aware of how much we're doing. And even there's this kind of a self-reliance myth, this idea that a lot of people, particularly Americans, have. They're going to be self-reliant. They're not going to rely on anyone else. They're going to do their own thing, which is a total misguided idea. Because if they buy anything at a store, they're basically living off of, they're freeloading, basically, in a certain sense. So I am freeloading on civilization, and I acknowledge it. They're freeloading and they don't acknowledge it. And that's the difference. There's certainly a way in which you can kind of do a lot of stuff yourself, and there's a certain virtue and benefit and joy of that. But this idea of being self-reliant, there's very, 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 very few people who are totally living in the woods completely on their own. And even they're like, the Unabomber, they go shopping, all the time to get supplies and stuff. They really can't live without relying on the past, what people have made in the past. So that was one tiny little example of how I want to then make the world better and add things that other people in the future will be able to use. And what we're trying to use is that every person born in the past and in the future and today has this really weird mix of talents. We're all kind of unique. We have different faces, and just as we have different faces, we have different talents, different mix of abilities, gifts, whatever you want to call it. And I think we each have, and this is a faith rather than proven, but I believe, and will prove over time, that we each have our own genius of some sort. We have some particular mix of something that we could do that nobody else can do, that would be a genius. It would be creative. It would be something. And part of the means to unleash that is we need technologies to do that. So I imagine Beethoven or Mozart being born before we invented pianos or the symphony. Okay, that genius, Mozart's genius. He was some guy in, a farmer somewhere in Nairobi. I don't know. He could have been anywhere in the past. And if he'd been born, what a loss to the world. So because of the invention of the piano and the symphony, we have this genius. Or George Lucas before they invented cinema and computers. That genius would have been lost. Shakespeare before they had invented language and printing or plays. So today, somewhere in the world, there's a Shakespeare or Mozart born who's waiting for us to invent the technology that would unleash their genius. And that's sort of what I am involved in, is trying to bring about as fast as possible all the new forms of technology so that every person born in the future or even today would have a chance to unleash their genius and share it in the world. And that is sort of that's the person that I want to become, who it can help make that come about in some way.
That's an exciting inner journey you're on, Kevin, for sure. I'm wondering, when you're thinking about that future, and let's say you're there today, Mozart's being born, you're just seeing the technologies come into play. How are you thinking? What is that future like in your head? How are you seeing the merger between people's creativity with the new technologies that are coming about today?
Yeah. I'm very optimistic. I think that we're right now, it's the best time in the world ever to be alive. And the tools like YouTube and these communication tools that we're using right now are just unleashing degrees of creativity that we've never seen before. I mean, it's hard to go into YouTube and not just be blown away by what people can do today, and not just making YouTube, but capturing it. I mean, part of what we're doing, we have cameras everywhere, and so things that people have done in the past are being captured and shared and inspiring other people to kind of outdo them or do even better. And that speed and acceleration of this learning and trying to, in a kind of friendly competition, be even more creative than the other person. This is really unheralded. It's just amazing, and I think really not appreciated about the levels at which this is happening, because it's really hard to see. I mean, there's millions and millions of channels, and you're going to see some little tiny 0.0001% of it. So I think these new tools really are helping people be inspired to do it, and then secondly, giving the instructions, conveying the information about actually how to do it. Again, this is when I was growing up in New Jersey in the 1950s and 60s. It's really hard to convey to my kids or anybody else how impoverished we were with information about how to do anything. I had huge desires of things, but I literally had no way to find out how to do it. I mean, where would you go? Where would you go? You wouldn't. The local bookstore would have some bestsellers. There's no libraries didn't have it. Nobody had this information about. Let's say you wanted to, I don't know, change the brake light in your car. You had to take it to the dealer. There was no do-it-yourself. You wanted to build a house. How would you do that? If you wanted to learn welding, you could just go on anyway. So we don't really appreciate the degree to which this new technology is liberating and unleashing creativity. And then now we're going to have this additional layer of AI creativity on top of that. It's just going to be astounding.
I was reading a recent article by you in Wired Magazine, and I'm going to try to sum it up here, basically saying like you're in silent awe and wow, viewing some of these images that are being produced. And you say human-made art must now be over as a question mark. Who can compete with the speed, cheapness, scale, and yes, wild creativity of the machines? And so you address, is art over? Has it gone to the robots? And I would love to just hear how you're thinking about that.
Right. I think at the next sentence, I'm not sure, as it says, and I predict that not a single person will lose their job because of
yeah.
And as far as I know, nobody on Earth has been fired because of AI to date, as far as I know. So, yeah. So the just briefly, the stance that we're going to have with AI is as partners.
Yeah.
So
co-creators in this.
Co-creators throughout. I do a daily AI art right now, and I call it my art, but I'm making it with the AI. And one of the things we know about it is it takes tremendous amounts of time and knowledge to actually get stuff that is good. So the AI by itself can only go so far. The human artists, we know how far they go, but together you can go further. And it's not just a matter of pushing the buttons. This was a fear of when the camera came along, the painters. There's, oh, all you do is push the button. And then, so painting's over. Well, painting wasn't over. And part of it is because it's not just a matter of pushing the button. It actually takes some skill to push the button. Some people are better at pushing the button than other people. Okay? So it's kind of weird to think about, oh, you're a good photographer because you know how to push the button. There's a lot more involved in the same with AI art. It's not just a matter of clicking. There's good, great AI artists who will produce things, and you'll say, oh my gosh, how do you do that? What are your prompts? This is not the prompts. This is Lance is the bike. He says it's not the bike. You know, what's his name?
Lance Armstrong.
Lance Armstrong. People say, you know, what bike are you using? You know, we must use a great bike to win. No, it's not the bike. It's not the AI. The AI is just a partner in this. And so we are going to partner with the AIs, and they are very good at doing kind of lowercase creativity, but what we all want to aim for is a uppercase creativity where it's kind of a breakthrough. It's never before seen, and it appeals to us. And our advantage over the AIs is that we know what humans like, and AI has no idea right now what humans really like. Not intuitively. They don't really understand. There's still a long way to go. They will accumulate over time, I believe, many things that we have, including consciousness. But it will never be human consciousness. It's going to be weirdly alien. They are artificial aliens. That's the metaphor. They're like Spock or Data. They're just alternative beings. They can think, they can be creative, but they're just weirdly different from us. That is their main benefit. That's not a bug. People are going to be trying to make them more and more human. No. Their advantage is that they're not human. So we get to have another kind of mind at work. We can produce things that we alone cannot produce. That's the whole purpose of these guys, is to make something that we ourselves cannot make by ourselves. We're not trying to replace us. We're trying to make new stuff. And so, yeah, I'm very excited by AI, and I advise people to embrace it and try it and become better at it and become at ease with it, because it's going to be more in our lives.
Thinking about this co-creation process, right? Like you mentioned the camera. If you want to be a better photographer, you've got to develop the skills. What are the skills that you think would be helpful to cultivate and develop to better co-create with the AI?
Yeah. So one is you need 10,000 hours, right? Use the AI for 10,000 hours. So there's it's like, it's like practicing the piano scales. It's like photography. Yeah, take a lot of pictures. I've been photographing for 50 years, a lot. So I've gotten better. So one is this kind of repetition, the time spent, the 10,000 hours that you need to get 10,000 hours of what they call deliberate practice. You know, the difference between practice and deliberate practice is that you practice to the point of failure, meaning you're actually trying to get better, trying to improve, rather than just repeat things. So that's one thing. The second one is it's weird. It's kind of like the dog whisperer. You kind of want to try and think like the AI. You want to try and understand how it works and begin to think. It's like, what does the AI do? What's it doing right now? How does it think? What does it want, so to speak? So you're kind of trying to, it's kind of empathy. It's kind of weirdly, you're trying to be empathetic to the AI, because that empathy allows you to communicate or partner with it. And it's, you know, it's like someone who's really good at fixing a car. They're kind of saying, well, you know, what's this car want? Where's it leaning? What is it missing? What does it want? And so so that's kind of an empathy is the second, besides the hours, there's an empathy. And then I think the third thing that we're going to see is a willingness to be playful and experiment, and to, you know, to fail, to try stuff, to you know, to explore, to head out, to not do the things that work or have worked in the past, but to try new stuff.
That makes me think about that willingness to embrace the unknown, to work and wrestle with failure. You have a great framework around the universe is conspiring to help us. That Paulo Coelho line.
Right.
When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you achieve it. There's also another great line: Gods watch over lost souls, especially when they dream. I just want to know how this idea of the universe conspiring to help you, what does this look like in your own life?
Right. So that is a term coined by someone whose name I forget, about 30 years ago, called pronoia. And pronoia is the opposite of paranoia. Paranoia, you're convinced that the universe is conspiring to work against you. They're all against me. Pronoia is where you're convinced that the universe is trying to help you. Everyone behind me is working to help me, to make me succeed. And I think in my own life that's the attitude I take. Is generally, I believe that most people work for good most of the time. Most people are altruistic most of the time, if you give them a chance. And yes, occasionally I'm cheated, but that's a small price to pay, because when you treat people at their best, they're going to give you the best. So I gain far, far, far more by the little bits of cheating that have been done, because I trusted people. So the first thing is, I inherently default trust people within reason. If I get an email from a guy talking about his Nigerian uncle got me $1 million, okay, I'm not dumb, but I mean, I trust within reason someone. And by the way, that's a really good rule when you're traveling, is if you just take a random person and ask them for help, they will help you. But if someone's coming up to you to offer help, then you have to be suspicious. So it's much better to, if you're really stuck, it's much better to go initiating the help sequence yourself, because that person is much more likely to really help you than if someone is voluntarily coming up into you to approach you to help you. So because the average person is going to be very, very helpful and kind. So as an example, when I was traveling, I had very few unpleasant experiences, almost never, even though I basically was trusting everybody that I met within reason. If, again, if someone came up to me trying to offer something, I wouldn't trust them because they're kind of self-selecting. I didn't choose them. They're coming to me. So so I was a little bit more suspicious about that. But I think just in general, believing the best in people, trusting strangers, surrounding yourself with people who are positive and believe the same, all conspire in a direction to unfairly bless me. I think it's unfair. I am incredibly lucky. So that's the other thing, is I acknowledge how lucky I am. I don't deserve the things I have been given. It's luck. Where I was born, how I was born, when I was born, all totally luck. The successes of things like Wired, huge component of luck. The right time, things tried before, it didn't work. Afterwards, too late. So there is just tremendous amount of luck in my life, and I acknowledge that too.
It's a great way to be thinking about your own life and how you move about in the world. I am wondering though, Kevin, just plenty of life experiences. When you are going through some of those challenging times, what is the internal dialogue like for you?
I have an aphorism in the book, this little excellent advice for living book, which says that one of the ways that you can choose to be lucky is to treat setbacks as temporary. In other words, it's just a temporary bump in the road. That's important. It's not the permanent state. It's not the default state. It's not the inevitable state. These setbacks. It's not due to me and my character. No, it's a little bump in the road. So that's one of the ways you can choose to be lucky. You can increase your luck by treating setbacks and troubles and hassles and disasters and everything else as temporary. You're on, we'll overcome them and we'll go on.
Another one of the great bits of advice is fully embrace what is the worst that can happen. And at each juncture in life, rehearsing your response to the worst and can reveal as an adventure. And there, you're no longer robbed by its power to stall you.
Right. So I did that when I was younger, as living with very little, or deliberately, kind of not quite volunteer poverty, but this idea that you would try to see how little you actually needed, so that if things got bad and you were out of a job or unhoused, you could see how you would deal with that, because you didn't have a house and you were living in a tent or whatever it is. And you would say, okay, I know how to do this. If it came to this, I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to die. I can survive this. Therefore, I'm not as afraid of it. And therefore, that gives me some power to kind of take a risk in a startup or whatever it is, or a world, or a trip around the world, because I know that I have been able to live at this other mode and do okay.
And it's a very grounded, powerful state to be able to operate in.
Yeah.
You mentioned you even understood that and lived that at a young age. Out of all this advice in the book, 400 plus aphorism, which part or what bit of advice took you the longest to live?
That's a really good question. There is one that's almost kind of a core and pivotal idea of the book that took me a long time to kind of get to. And it is really something I wished I'd known when I was 20. And it's one of the shortest ones. It's don't try to be the best. Try to be the only. Don't be the best. Be the only. Being the only is really the ultimate goal. And that means do the things that only you can do. I think like a lot of people, I was looking for this holy trinity of this apex of, like, I want to do something that I really enjoy doing and that I'm really, really good at, and that I get paid to do. Okay. So like for most people, that is like the ultimate peak, right? If you love what you're doing, you're really, really good at it, and you're getting paid a lot to do it, what could be better? Well, actually, there is something better. And that came late in life, in part because achieving those first three produced a whole bunch of opportunities to do more of that. So I had more choices to do things that I would be really good at this. I would really enjoy doing this, and there's some money in doing it. But I'm going to say no, because I can think of 5 other people who would do this. I want to do this one over here because there's nobody who can do that one. That's for me. That's what I am born to do. That's what I'm here for. And by the way, when I'm doing that, all those other ones are so easy. It's like, it's easy because I know that there's no one else doing it. And so this is one of the things I do when I'm working on a project is I talk about what I'm trying to do, hoping that people will steal it. I talk about what I'm going to do for years, hoping that other people will do it, because if someone else does it, steals my idea, that's like I don't need to do that one because someone else could do it. I'm going to come back to the ones, the task, the art, the device, the writing, whatever it is that nobody else can do. That's my part. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm aiming for, is to become the best me. And that means that there's not going to be anyone doing it. And so, by the way, that's really good. Like when I was writing a book, my first book, there were 2 other really good writers writing books very similar. And it felt like we're in a race. Now I don't have that, because it's like, oh, I've been trying to give this away for 5 years. I've been trying to talk people. I've been trying to pay people to write this thing. I can't get anybody to write it. I still think it's a great idea. No, I'm going to write it because it's for me. I don't have to. No one else is. There's no competition. I can take my time because I've been trying to give it away. I've been trying to pay people. So yes, there are times when people say, well, I want to do this. I want to be the first to do it. If I don't do it, someone else will do it. And there's kind of a haste and stuff. And I think, okay, maybe when you're young, you don't have that many opportunities. That's fine. But I think over the long term, where you want to go to is you want to arrive at the place where there's no word for what you're doing. It's you. No one else can do what it is. Only you can do it. You're inimitable, and you're doing the thing that you're born to do. And it takes a lot of time and kind of self-knowledge and trial to kind of arrive there. It's basically takes your whole life to figure out what that is.
I guess I'm intrigued by that last part, that it took you so long to get there, because I could be wrong on this, Kevin. You're very self-aware, and you seem to not have a lot of those self-imposed limitations people tend to place on themselves. And so I'm just wondering, like, why did you not then discover that even sooner?
Because I'm interested in lots of things, and to actually understand what no one else can do, I have to kind of like really understand what everyone else can do. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, and there's lots of things I can do, but I don't know which one no one else can do. That takes some time to figure out, to see, well, I see other people try, they're not doing this, or I think it's easier to kind of maybe figure out what I could do and harder to figure out what other people can't do. So there's 2 parts of it. It's kind of not just being self-aware. It's also being kind of aware of the world and what's actually happening out there and what people find difficulty in doing. And so, so like a lot of things in life, it's not just interior. I mean, this is the beauty. This is why you're here and I'm talking to you and you're talking to me, and we have friends and family around us, is we need other people to provide that view of us interiorly, and also the view of what's possible outside of us. And so I'm horrified often by kind of loners, because it's very dangerous, because they they aren't getting that feedback. They're not really self-aware, and they're not really aware of what's the world's capable of and what it can do. And so there's two parts. There's this kind of self-awareness, but there's also world awareness, being reality-based, being evidence-based, of paying attention to what the world is saying about what it is that we're doing. You can't just only go your way then it's kind of you become like a fantasy world. It's a kind of a mental illness in a certain sense. You have to balance both your own internal weirdness and then the reality of the world.
This makes me think of another bit of your wisdom. It is the duty of a student to get everything out of the teacher, and the duty of the teacher to get everything out of the student.
Right.
You being in the role as a teacher, I'm assuming more often at this stage, what do you find yourself wishing your students would ask?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the hardest, the kinds of things that I'm most interested in are where people are being creative, whether that's creatively artistically, creatively technically, creatively scientifically, creative culturally. And this, I'm speaking to myself a little bit, but it's very, very difficult to unleash our minds from what we know how to do and what has been done. Like when we try to think about the future, oh my gosh, it is so hard to forget what we expect the future to be, because we're constantly being surprised by the future. And it's because it's really hard for us to loosen up our imaginations from what is the norm, from what we expect. And that's true in art and making anything and doing the kind of stuff that I'm interested in. Getting kind of the trite outside the box thinking is really, really difficult. And it's particularly difficult with people who are very talented and very and have mastered things. And it's almost like the more they're expert on something, the harder it is for them to imagine something different and new. And you wouldn't think that, but it is. And the reason is because they know how impossible and how hard that is, the other thing. And it's like saying, no, you can't, it's impossible, but I know that seems impossible, but you have to kind of go beyond that. So that ability, and it's not just the students too, that ability to kind of unleash the constraints of creativity are very hard. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why I'm very pro AI, because I think the partnership with AI will help us do that. And I see that in my use. I do my daily AI art. It's like, oh my gosh, that's one of the benefits. Is like I don't think any human would ever thought about that, but that's a possibility. There it is. Wow, that's really cool. And so this sort of whether it's in science, mathematics, academics, art, entrepreneur, the thing for students that I wish they would do more of is ask like, why not? Okay. What if? Just sort of suspending the disbelief a little bit longer, 2 more steps, and inhabiting an alternative scenario and kind of following it all the way through and just trying it out. So that's really doesn't come natural. It really has to be taught.
At what areas and environments are you most finding yourself tapping into your student self, where you're really just thirsting for knowledge?
Yeah. I think it was someone else's wisdom that I put it to my own words, which is I find the most profitable is when I become curious about things that I'm not interested in. Okay. So it's like, I find it really amazing if I head down into like something in YouTube or wherever, where like I have no interest in this, but I'm going to go down anyway and see what's there. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is so incredible. I mean, I just recently was watching makeup tutorials. Like I am like the least fashionable person on the planet. I mean, like I am like negative makeup, but I have no interest in makeup tutorials, but I'm very curious about them and just getting into them. And it's like seeing what's going on. And it's like, I know nothing. And that newbie thing is like, oh my gosh, there's this world. Like, there's all this stuff. There's these products, and there's these schools of thought, and there's a philosophy. And it's like, wow. So being curious about things you're not interested in, or that I'm not interested in, is something that I'm finding one of the best ways to put me in that student mode.
How are you balancing then the 10,000 hours, that deliberate practice, with also the exploration and the curiosity?
Yeah. Well, I'm making no attempt at all to ever to master makeup. I'm just the explorer to see what's there. So what I'm spending 10,000 hours in is I'm spending 10,000 hours exploring YouTube. Hmm. I would love to be a YouTube expert in the sense of not the individual things, but like what is actually going on there, because I think there's nobody who knows, and I mean, I think even the people at YouTube don't really have a grasp of what's happening. And so
what are you looking at to understand the second and third order effects?
Yeah. So it's like there's one thing is just the velocity of information being exchanged, how fast someone will make some little innovation, post it, and then within hours, days, someone else has taken that and improved it and posted their thing. And so again, this is not just makeup artists, this is like brain surgeons watching the recording, the surgery, some new technique, and they put it up, and the brain surgeon is watching it, and they're going to go back that day, and they're going to do it, and they're going to put it up. And it's like, it's like on steroids, instead of publishing in a paper 3 years later. And so there's things like this, sort of looking at the velocity of innovation. It's looking at how people are using it. Like, does the shorts, are they working? What kinds of, just the metrics, what kinds of things are people watching all the way through? So there's a lot of stuff, and I don't, it's so new that I don't think first of all, I don't think there's a lot of academic study analysis of what it is, but there's also, just in terms of kind of like people appreciating it. Some people down in the trenches who are making YouTubes every day, they have some idea about the dynamic, but I think looking at the larger picture, like, well, what is actually being covered? Where are the white spaces? What's not been YouTubeized? I mean, what's not being covered? That's a question I haven't seen. So I could easily spend 10,000 hours in trying to parse YouTube, and I'm pretty sure if there's anyone else doing it, there's only one or two people doing it.
Kevin, I know we need to close this out in a minute, but last time we spoke, you mentioned Stuart Brand. He's one of those people that you admire, and then you find out more and you actually admire more of, as opposed to a lot of people you admire less. Who else do you have that deep admiration for, and that admiration keeps building on top of each other?
in the same orbit is Danny Hillis, who is another co-founder of the Long Now Foundation, a polymath, who has taught me a lot in terms of how to think, but also I think is a really good person and lives his life with admirable dignity and admirable humility and other things that I respect. And so I get to interact with him on an occasional basis, and I am still learning from him. I would say in the kind of celebrities field, I have had the privilege of interacting with Jeff Bezos, and I continue to admire Jeff. He's a, like most of us, he's a flawed, not non-perfect person, but nonetheless, I keep learning from him, and I believe he's really trying hard, and I admire how he's going about his life of learning himself. And so it's a really tough job being one of the richest people in the world, and a lot of people are very eager to criticize him, but I find myself admiring many of the moves that he's made.
Well, Kevin, I admire what you've done over the years, and then for passing this knowledge that you've accumulated on the recent book, Excellent Advice for Living, Wisdom I Wish I'd Known Earlier. Kevin Kelly, where else can we direct the listeners? Of course, in the show notes, we have the book and all of your previous books, but where else would you like the listeners going?
I have a little newsletter called Recommendo, which has been going on for 5 or 6 years. Every Sunday morning, we have 6 little tiny recommendations of cool stuff, whether it's stuff to read, things to watch, tips, tricks, helpful stuff that would get you through the day or while you're traveling or in the kitchen, whatever. So it's called Recommendo. 60,000 people subscribe for free. So
I'm one of those subscribers, and I love your newsletter, so I highly recommend it.
That's it. But I thank you for your questions about excellent advice for living. For me, is one of the funnest things I've done. One of the coolest projects that I've been involved in. 450 little aphorisms that take a whole bunch of essays and put it down into one little tweet. I've compressed it for you. You can expand them as you read them. I hope that you pass one on to, if you find it useful, pass it on to a young person.
Yeah, the longtime listeners and followers, you guys know how many times I've shared Kevin's previous bits of wisdom. This is one of those great books to have just laying around your office, the coffee table, flip through again and again. But Kevin Kelly, I can't thank you enough for joining us on What Got You There.
Well, thank you so much.